Welcome to San Mateo County Today. Conversations with government leaders throughout San Mateo County. Here's your host, Marshall Wilson.
It's all about San Mateo on San Mateo County Today. First, I'm joined by County Board of Supervisors President Don Horsley, who's going to talk about jobs, housing affordability, and other issues that affect the county. And then I'm joined by Rick Bonilla, Deputy Mayor of the City of San Mateo, who's going to talk about the downtown and other issues affecting the City of San Mateo. Welcome to San Mateo County Today. I'm your host, Marshall Wilson. Thank you for joining us on San Mateo County Today. I'm joined now by Don Horsley, San Mateo County Board of Supervisors President for 2017. Don, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Marshall.
So what are the priorities as Board President for 2017? What are your priorities for this year?
Well, just happened to bring a little cheat sheet to kind of remind myself, but one of the two really major issues, one is transportation, and I think anybody who drives on Highway 101 or 280 or even on the coast side of Highway 1 realizes that we are just really gridlocked with traffic. And so I'm not going to say that I'm going to be able to solve that in 2017, but I think we're going to have to come up with some kind of a long-term plan on what are we going to do. Are we going to allow ourselves to be choked by traffic? And that in the long run is an economic stranglehold on the whole area. So we're going to have to figure out some long-term strategy. In fact, when I took over as the board president, I said that is a high priority, but we don't have any easy answers and we're not going to come up with any quick solutions, but we're going to have to figure out some strategic approaches that we have to take the long view of being able to address some of those issues.
And one of the committees you're on is the Jobs Housing Task Force.
Well,
because the traffic is...
Yeah, it's linked to housing, because one of the things we know, well, first of all, we know that we've created lots of jobs. In the last administration, they always talked about the number of jobs that were created nationally. But locally, in the last 4 years, we created somewhere in the neighborhood about 55,000 jobs, but only about 2,000 new housing units. So you can kind of, if you visualize this, 26 people waiting for one house. So what's happened is that while we've created all these jobs, all the people who take them live someplace else. So we know that 62% of the people who work in San Mateo County come from someplace else. So they're the people on the bridges and the highways and the roadways and in the neighborhoods as well. And so, again, if we could do something more in terms of housing, that would be, I think that would help with our transportation problem, especially if we can build along the transportation corridors. And that's where essentially the state would like us to go anyway, because it reduces greenhouse gases and fewer miles on the road, et cetera, et cetera. Another priority is really dealing with homeless problem. Now, I was the sheriff before, and we had homeless problems then. And then when I first came on the board, we do this annual count of the homeless, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,000 people who are homeless in San Mateo County. And 6 years later, that number is just basically almost the same. We've done a lot of things. We have facilities on Maple Street, and we have Project We Hope in East Palo Alto, and we have a facility up in the north part of the county. And so we do a good job in terms of these housing for homelessness, like shelters in essence, but we haven't been able to change that dynamic. And in this year, we're going to try a different approach. We're going to try a rapid rehousing, getting people into housing as soon as possible. And also when people come to us and they're saying that they're in danger of being homeless, that we actually provide some resources to actually keep them in the house that they're currently in so that they don't end up as homeless. So we're going to try a different approach, and hopefully this time we'll be more successful. And again, we've set a goal of ending homelessness in this county by 2020. I know it's a lofty goal. I think we can achieve it. We're always going to have some level of homelessness, but if we can get that numbers down to 300 or 400 and continue to work on it, and it's not just shelters, it's also building some affordable units and coming up with new and strategic approaches.
Is the proceeds from Measure K going to help with that rapid rehousing and helping to solve that homeless issue? And Measure K, again, is the half-cent sales tax extension that was approved by voters in 2016.
Well, Measure K gives us lots of different opportunities, and it does, in fact. We have full-service partnerships at the schools. We have social workers at schools with we have lots of low-income people, and again, with the idea of trying to get ahead of problems before they actually, manufacture themselves or manifest themselves in terms of homelessness. We also have resource centers that are about 5 or 6 of them throughout the community that provides resources, and we actually fund those and make sure that they have the adequate resources to help people stay in their housing. And then we've done a lot of other things with, for example, we know that a lot of the people who are homeless, not all, but a significant number have drug and alcohol problems as well as mental health issues. So we put millions more into mental health. We're building a respite center so that when people have, we've come across people, or they're not we, but basically law enforcement or the community, when they come across somebody who's in, a mental health crisis, they can, instead of bringing him to jail or to the psych ward, they could bring him to our respite center. So we've done a lot of things where we have lots of resources now that we did not have and would not otherwise have if it weren't for Measure K. And one of the ones that I think I'm most excited about is called Laura's Law, and it's outpatient assisted treatment. And what that means is that oftentimes people who are, not oftentimes, almost always, when somebody's mentally ill, many times they will accept treatment, but other times they will not, because they will say, I'm okay, I'm not mentally ill. They refuse to admit that they're mentally ill, when in fact they are maybe schizophrenic or bipolar. And this Laura's Law allows us, or a family member or a loved one or somebody who's connected to that person, to actually get them before a judge who will order them into treatment. And so again, it's an expensive system, but I think it's the right thing to do. And we've had some initial success at getting people into treatment. Now, one would say, well, why would a judge be able to get somebody into treatment? Well, even if somebody's mentally ill, we all recognize the authority of a court.
Right.
And so even if somebody's mentally ill and they don't think that they're mentally ill, and if they're ordered by a judge to go into treatment, will they feel compelled to do it? But they may not feel compelled if it's their husband, wife, father, mother, cousin, live-in, friend, whatever. But they will, in our experience, is that it does work if a judge orders them into treatment. So if we can, put more resources into mentally ill to get them off the street, to get them into housing. And the other thing we do, by the way, is that for landlords who are willing to take our clients, basically mentally ill people, we give them incentives. I think the incentive is about $1,000. We also tell them that there'll be a voucher, they'll get their rent. If anything goes wrong, we'll make sure that they're made whole. So we've had a great deal of success with that, as well as at recruiting landlords who have a heart. Right. And we actually have a process of recognize them for their, basically it's a service to the whole community, and as well as it's a service to the individual who now has a place to live.
As from a government policy perspective, is it seen as, let's talk about cost for a second, less expensive overall for the taxpayer to implement something like Laura's Law, and for what you're talking about with like rapid rehousing and some of these services, than having these people at the emergency room in the jails?
Well, you could do studies about that, and you can prove and say, well, it costs $100 a day to have somebody in jail, or $1,000 a day to have somebody in a hospital. You probably could do those kind of cost-benefit analysis, but one of the things that I think is that the responsibility of government and community is taking care of those who are least able to take care of themselves. I think it's the right thing to do. It's the humane thing to do. In the long run, it actually strengthens our communities. Think about, if you're the parent of somebody, a child who's schizophrenic, and it's agonizing to see them on the street, their life to degenerate, and living in a really unhealthy, unsafe way. And you're kind of, you're at wit's end. What do I do? How can I get help? And so this is a system that gives that family the tool to deal with that loved one, that child. That they want the best for that child.
I want to talk a little bit more about Measure K, and again, that was the half-cent sales tax extension approved by voters, about some of the other projects that's funding. Right now, it brings in about $80 million a year to the county, and I think one of the most visible projects right now down at County Center is the new Regional Operations Center. Can you talk about why that's a priority for the county?
Well, somebody who's been in law enforcement myself, I knew that when I was in a patrol car, what we used to call radio cars. Your lifeline really is that dispatch center. They're the ones that send you places, that kind of watch out for you to make sure that you're okay. But at the same time, I'll give you another good example is that you might be at a Rotary Club meeting and somebody has a diabetic coma or starts to go into a diabetic coma. You call up that dispatch center. You want to make sure that they give you good information, because it's not just calling for an ambulance. It's also talking about, what do I do in the meantime? And they have a whole protocol that they can tell you exactly what to do. They keep you on the line. They call the fire department, the ambulance service. And having a system that is able to bring all those resources together in an effective and efficient way is incredibly important. And anybody who's having been in law enforcement again and having seen what they can do with somebody who has a heart attack or a bad accident or going into a diabetic coma, or a child that maybe fell into a swimming pool and now needs to be resuscitated. Having a good emergency response system is really incredibly important, and having them in a facility that actually has use of all the modern technologies is incredibly important. And so that facility, well, we're starting to the groundbreaking of the process is undergoing as we speak today, and eventually we'll put them at a 21st century facility for the first time. And they do all of the dispatch for all the fire services and many of the police agencies. And my hope is that eventually they'll do it for all of the police agencies. First of all, it's cost effective, and it'll ensure that we get the best in public safety.
Right, because currently they do it for all the fire agencies, no matter what cities they're in. So it's basically the fire has a protocol where there's really no city boundaries.
That's right.
And so once they go toward, and you think law enforcement would move towards that for dispatch as well, or at least for the dispatch part of it?
Well, they are actually now. They've picked up, the Sheriff's Department has Millbrae and several other cities contract with the Sheriff's Department, but there are other cities that are contracting. Daly City, the largest city in the county, actually is now contracting with the county. Actually saves the city, if I'm not mistaken, the exact numbers. Don't hold me to the exact numbers, but I believe it's a couple $1 million a year. So it's not only is it more efficient, but it's cost effective. So I think that eventually all of the cities will eventually migrate to a single dispatch center.
All right, and we have about a minute or so left, and one item I wanted to touch on, it's February, which is Black History Month, and I know that's very important for you to acknowledge that here in San Mateo County.
I did talk about that as actually it's an interesting book that I'd recommend for people. It's called The Warmth of Other Suns. The last name of the author is Wilkerson. It really talks about 4 families who migrated from the south into the north. And the reason I talked about this because of we've seen issues with law enforcement, and having been in law enforcement, I bleed when I see some of these tapes that I think were really inappropriate. And so when I talked about it is that, we really all want the same things, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whomever, we all want the same things for our families. And so with Black History Month, I was going to do some actually poetry readings of African Americans who wrote about their experiences of migrating from the south to the north. And so the interesting thing is that my relatives were from Italy, and some of the experiences are very similar. The one difference is that they were really able to assimilate into the larger community, whereas by bad public policy, not necessarily only by government, but to some extent by prejudice that we all had, or our communities had, we oftentimes jam people into substandard housing and into the worst jobs and the worst schools, and we end up, when you have bad public policy, you will end up with bad results. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about with Black History Month is in spite of that, of the things that African Americans have contributed to this country in terms of the arts, in terms of General Colin, can't think of Colin Powell, Susan Rice, our UN, or she was actually the National Security Advisor. They have risen above all those obstacles and contributed so much to American life. And I just wanted to emphasize the importance that African Americans have been to this country, and also at the same time recognize that the disadvantages that they have had to fight through, and that I just want to also make sure that we all kind of recognize we all want the same things for our families and for our communities.
Well, that wraps up this segment of San Mateo County Today. Don Horsley, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back to San Mateo County Today. I'm your host, Marshall Wilson. I'm joined now by San Mateo Deputy Mayor Rick Bonilla. Rick, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So what is new in San Mateo? You've got a lot going on. It's the start of 2017. Bay Meadows is being built out. You're implementing a new minimum wage law. What's going on in San Mateo?
Well, those things are great things that really make a big difference in San Mateo, because the new community of Bay Meadows is everything that it was planned to be and more. It's truly transit-oriented development, and according to the metrics we're collecting, the trip reduction measures that have been put in place are working. So people are using the train or other modes, not the cars as much as people have been historically. So that development is growing. We have SurveyMonkey there now, and other things are going to be built. There will be a new retail strip along Delaware there on the new part. So yeah, it's doing great. The minimum wage, it seems to be working out just fine. I have not heard any complaints. I have asked some employees working in some businesses, are you aware of the minimum wage? And it seems that everybody is. So it's going to change the way that people who work at low-wage jobs in San Mateo are able to afford to live here overall. And it goes to $15 per hour by 2019, by January 1st, 2019, which is 3 years ahead of the state. And after that, it links to the CPI, which is going to allow that wage to increase without any further adjudication or legislation.
So what is going on now in the downtown corridor? I know there's a new downtown-specific plan that you're working on. Tell us about that.
Well, it's the downtown is what it is. It's been a great place. It's a beautiful historic place with nice old buildings, a true grid for a downtown, which many cities on the peninsula lack. But it's getting to the point where it's crowded, the streets are very busy. We've been working on parking actually for 7 years, and we're going to be making some improvements for parking. But we have the real catalyst is we have these two lots that the city owns between 3rd and 4th and 4th and 5th Avenues, just east of the railroad tracks.
Right.
One was the old Kinko's building, used to be there years ago. We call it the Kinko's site, but it's been gone for many years. And the other is where the Workers' Resource Center is right now.
Right.
Those two lots belong to the city. We purchased them under redevelopment while that still existed. And then after it was ended, we had to go through some process with the state to regain control of them, but we did, because they're vital really to the core of our downtown. They're downtown, I don't know whether many people are aware, but if you check the website for the new downtown planning process, you'll see the downtown extends along B Street and up to El Camino, but also between 3rd and 4th Avenues down to 101. Okay, so this east side of the tracks represents a new area where housing, new jobs, things can be located that will actually augment downtown and make it a more interesting place to be and to work. Many businesses ask about the opportunities to locate in downtown San Mateo. And one of the issues is we don't really have large enough floor plates for modern businesses. So, and then there's the fact that we have our transit station right there, and really not very much housing, dense housing near it. And I use the word dense cautiously, because I know that people are cautious about that. But we're going to go through a full planning process where we want the people to come out and listen and share with us their thoughts. And so it's going to be a great thing. And I really look forward to it.
When was the last time that the city took a hard look at the downtown and what needs to be done? What I find interesting about these long-term planning processes is you have to look many years down in the future.
You do.
To how things are going to change and what are people going to be looking for. I know there's been a lot of controversy in downtown over the years about height limits, for instance.
Yes. So Measure H was enacted, I think, in the late 80s when people became alarmed because they saw some new buildings going up to 10 and 14 stories. And those are clearly evident. They're still there. And so These measures were voted on by the people, and the only way they can be changed is by the people. They have limited heights throughout most of downtown to 55 feet, and only in some areas can they go to 75 feet with the provision of a public benefit that is to be negotiated, offered by the developer, negotiated with the city. Something that has not been used very often or very much. So we have these certain limitations, and we've been working within them. But, you know, times have changed. We have a huge housing crisis. Business is booming. And one of the byproducts is lots of cars on the road. So we're looking for opportunities for people to get out of the car and greatly reduce single occupancy vehicle trips, get people onto the train, get people onto the bus. The bus is, I mean, I've used the bus recently. The bus is, you know, there's room, it's efficient. You can catch express buses, but the train I have been using more often now. And I'm finding, just last night, I got to Mountain View in 20 minutes for a dinner that I wanted to attend, and I knew it would take me an hour in the car. So I just walked over to the train station. 20 minutes later, I was there. So I'm really looking forward to giving people who are embracing these new alternate modes of transportation as the way to get around and not have to own a car, pay for insurance, pay for fuel, pay to store the car someplace. Actually, the way developments are being built now, there is such a thing as unbundled parking. You can buy a place, not buy the parking. So,
really?
So it makes housing more affordable, right? So, you know, it's an interesting thing. But yeah, I think that it's going to be a process. We're going to bring people with lots of experience to speak to the public and collect ideas, share ideas, and try to come up with the best plan that we can.
Now, I understand one of the projects you're involved in countywide is Peninsula Clean Energy.
Yes.
Tell us, what is Peninsula Clean Energy? Because this is a fairly new entity, and what are the goals?
Well, Peninsula Clean Energy is the county's default electrical energy provider, so which PG&E used to be. And now it's been kind of, as far as electrical generation goes only, PG&E has been kind of displaced as the electrical generation provider because PCE is a new joint powers authority. Its actual legal term is that it's a community choice aggregation. And there's a law that was written in 2002, a state law, that said during the energy crisis, if you remember Enron and everything, it said that cities could seek to purchase their own energy on the open market. Any municipality could, right? And then they would be able to have that energy loaded onto the grid and have the billing process carried on by the what was the default, but it's the investor-owned utility. In our case, it's PG&E.
They own the distribution.
They still own the poles. They still do the transmission. They own distribution. They, if you have a problem with anything, an outage, or you call them, right? If you have a problem with billing, you can call them, or you can call PCE if it's an electrical issue. You can call Peninsula Clean Energy. By the way, you can reach Peninsula Clean Energy at peninsulacleanenergy.com. And it's in my opinion, I have been with it since before the inception of it. I actually was one of the big pushers for it because I see it as a way. Clearly, what we're doing is we're purchasing not just energy, but renewable energy. And that's what we're having loaded onto the grid. Right now we have two options. One is called Eco Plus, where you can purchase 50% renewable energy. Plus there are other greenhouse gas free sources. The total is 75% greenhouse gas free. And that the generation on that product is pegged, and it is our mission to keep the cost of our generation pegged at 5% less than PG&E's generation for their similar product, which is their only product. It's 30% renewable, and between some other things, I think they're at 60% greenhouse gas free. So the Eco Plus product is 75% greenhouse gas free. We have the Eco 100 product, which is 100% renewable energy, and costs, I think, 1 cent per kilowatt hour of electricity more than PG&E's product. Has the great advantage of eliminating greenhouse gas emissions that are produced in generation. Electrical generation is one of the greatest producers of greenhouse gas emissions that there is. So we're really working to clean up the air and take a bite out of climate change.
So as a homeowner or a resident here in San Mateo County, am I going to get a bill from Peninsula Clean Energy? Or how do I know if the money I'm sending to PG&E is going for cleaner energy? How does that work?
Very good question. You will continue to get a bill from PG&E. If you look at your past bills, you see where PG&E actually had a line item for generation. It says PG&E generation, right? Now there's going to be a line item that displaces that. It'll say Peninsula Clean Energy Generation. Okay. So it's right on the bill. It's shown as a separate line item that adds up to part of the total. You will not see any difference. So people like to say it's the biggest change you'll never notice, right? Because really it just happens seamlessly. It's a very simple transition. People are automatically opted in. They get 4 notices, 2 ahead and 2 after. If they choose to, they can opt out. They can go back to PG&E for whatever reason. They can do it over the internet. They can make a phone call. They can send an email. They can do it over the website. They can do whatever they like. But I feel confident that people are going to realize that this is the best way to go. Not only for us now, because it's going to save a lot of people money, but because going into the future and in the long run for our future generations, it's going to provide a cleaner atmosphere for them.
Well, it's one thing, it's ready to talk about that. I grew up in San Mateo County, and I remember the days still when there was a big haze over the entire Bay Area, and those days are almost past now, which is, I think, a testament to good public policy and what's being done there. Right.
It means we've been doing the right thing, and we're learning that we can do even better, and fairly painlessly. Right? I mean, the renewable generation market is growing rapidly, okay? And so we're able to search for contracts in California that will provide the renewable energy we need. We don't even have to go out of California. This is one of my big things. If we're going to create jobs, and we are creating jobs, they need to be good paying jobs with a future for our people that we represent, right? So we have an order of priority. First, San Mateo County, then the Bay Area, and then Northern California, and then California at large. And that's how we do our purchasing, and it's a great policy. I'm really proud of that.
All right. Well, thank you for that update, and thank you for joining us on San Mateo County Today. And thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Marshall Wilson. See you next time.